Time to rock and roll!
Hello my friends. My name is Bot Mathematician and this is Harmonic.
Also, Chief Investigative Reporter Dora joined us this evening.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
The best cards in Hearthstone are well known to all players. They are popular, extremely effective and define the metagame. But do you know which cards are the worst?
In classic Hearthstone, the worst card was Magma Rager, but this creature was very lucky, as it at least became known for its uselessness and even turned into a meme. It is definitely one of the symbols of vanilla Hearthstone. The card had a specific mission, teaching new players to distinguish good cards from bad cards. Modern worst cards are much less fortunate. They are forgotten and will never be a part of gaming history.
In this video, we will talk about the most useless cards and how power creep affected their fate. We have determined their power level and will show you that not all of them are weak.
To do this, we will use our experimental benchmark, which determines the nominal power of all the components of the card based on basic standards of the game.
This time for the review we decided to use cards from the Festival of Legends expansion, as they have been in standard for the longest time and had a lot of opportunities to find a niche in the metagame, but for some reason they turned out to be useless even for notable experimentation. Every fortnight we collected data on the usefulness of all cards in the standard format metagame, and for 18 months we have never recorded the presence of these cards in the most popular builds. Let's start with the Harmonic Disco spell, which is summoner and buffer at the same time. The card has two usage scenarios that swap each turn. You are offered to discover and summon a creature for 5 mana, gaining a negligible buff, or 1 mana a creature and significantly increase its stats. On paper, both effects are equivalent to a notional 8 mana crystals by the game's basic standards, but in practice you can get more of a notional benefit if you summon a creature for 5 mana, since high-cost creatures can have more strong effects. Utility ratio is the most important metric. It shows how closely the average nominal cost of the effect matches the actual mana cost of the card. If the result is close to 1, the card is fully compliant with the game's base power level by 2014 standards. Modern cards are about 2 times more powerful than the basic cards. For this spell, that coefficient is 1.6.
That means the card is weaker than most modern cards, but the card could be useful in certain circumstances. In modern Hearthstone, powerful synergies are more important. For example, a card could be used in a holy spell synergy if players got additional benefits from using it.
Unpopular has been turned out to be too unpopular. The card is a slightly improved version of Piloted Sky Golem. The developers took the card from the 2014 set, added a few % of power to its effect and published it 9 years later. The card is hopelessly bad, despite the fact that it is 50% more powerful than the basic standard.
Cowbo Soloist has a very interesting effect. Under certain conditions it summons 2 degraded analogs of Kobold Geomancer. The card looks balanced and matches the current power level, but there are no specific scenarios for its use. Especially when you consider that Seif was added in the next expansion. The card has never been seen in popular meta builds. Death Metal Knight has a similar effect as Blood Trend, but for some reason it's been unclaimed. Getting a creature that is equivalent to 4 mana crystals for a small damage to your hero looks quite attractive, especially for aggressive or tempo archetypes, but these decks do not use healing. This means the card can only find a place in a very specific control deck. Even assuming you can put a creature on the board 30% of the time for free, the utility ratio is only 1.7, which doesn't look that powerful. This card demonstrates a very unusual approach to design. The condition for activating the effect prevented the card from getting out of control, but at the same time made it useless.
Ambient Lightspawn is a pretty powerful card that is balanced in an interesting way. Activating the effect at least once is an easy enough task thanks to the finale keyword, but in this case activating it multiple times in a row becomes much more difficult. In turn, the overheal and long-term action features, as well as a wide synergy, can allow you to activate the effect 4 times and even more under certain circumstances, although it should be recognized that this is very situational and not very easy. On paper, the card looks promising. The overheal archetype is finally taking shape. It's popular and relatively competitive, at least at low ranks. So why is the card useless? I think the main reason is cost. The archetype uses mostly 1 or 2 mana cards and that's the only thing that makes it viable. In today's circumstances, your opponent may not leave you a chance before you try to take advantage of this card, and this is a direct consequence of the current level of power creep.
Instrument Smasher's utility ratio is in line with the current power level of most cards in the game, but the card has become useless due to the lack of synergy benefits. The card contains a random factor. You can get a new random class weapon after destroying the current one. In the best case, you get a weapon for 6 mana. In the worst case, a terrible option for 2 mana, but in most cases you will only be able to use the weapon on the next turn. The effect of the card is interesting and can theoretically be used multiple times, but in the absence of powerful synergy, the card is useless.
Snakebite is a significantly improved version of Wicked Skeleton. The developers took a forgotten useless card and increased its power several times, so that we ended up with another forgotten card. Snakebite has a lot of potential that is very hard to find a use for. Let's say 2 creatures die during the turn, which is a realistic scenario. The card will deal 3 damage and possibly save its body, which on average would be equivalent to almost 4 mana crystals. In the case of 7 creatures being destroyed, the creature's nominal value would be 12 mana, but getting that much value is unrealistic. But on average we will get a very good creature in terms of benefits. So why is the card useless? The main problem lies in ideology. The card would be a great asset in the pirate archetype, but the deck prefers to deal damage to your opponent's face rather than destroy creatures on the board. The card feels like it's designed for the control archetype, but this concept isn't viable for the Demon Hunter. I get the feeling that the card was out of its class. Perhaps it was originally designed for Death Knight. This is a great example of how a potentially very powerful card can't find use cases in the modern competitive environment.
Tough Crowd is the reincarnation of Kidnapper on steroids. I was surprised to see the card on the list of completely useless tools, as I was sure the card had seen play for a while, but it seems to have been used only as part of niche experiments. The big drawback of the card is the terrible stats and conditions for activating the effect. Not always cards with the Outcast keyword can be used at the right moment, which is a huge disadvantage. Without the effect, the card is completely meaningless.
I feel like I'm seeing Guitar Soloist for the first time. Despite having a low utility ratio, the cards that draw have increased utility, but this creature has an identity crisis. The increased attack characteristics hint that the card is best used in aggro decks, but the conditions for activating the effect contradict this, and there aren't enough suitable tools for a proper control archetype. All in all, Demon Hunter has a lot of bad luck with cards.
Merch Seller's effect reminds me a lot of Mischief Maker. Basically, the card cancels your opponent's draw phase at the beginning of the turn and gives him a random spell instead. This way you don't destroy your opponent's card, but it makes the card he gets significantly less useful than the card on top of the deck. This is comparable to casting the Pilfer spell on your opponent instead of draw. The effect can be repeated an unlimited number of times. The card is more in line with the Hearthstone basic set, but in the current environment it is designed to create fun situations when placed on the board with a random effect.
I love the obsessive fan design and would love to play in a meta in which this card is useful, but in terms of relevance the card is terrible. You force your opponent to first destroy this card to have more opportunities to eliminate a stealth creature. From this point of view, the card's effect is reminiscent of taunt mechanics. You can assume the card is made for the arena mode, but it's terrible in any conditions.
Cowbo Soloist is another very weak card created for no clear purpose. The card could have been part of aggro deck 6-7 years ago, but it has a condition that makes it difficult to activate the effect in most cases, since aggro decks always want to have a presence on the board. In today's environment this effect doesn't make sense.
Grimm Totem Buzzkill is a very strange card. In order to draw 3 cards from the deck you need to discard a weapon. So you get 3 cards but lose 1 card, which means the benefit is 2 cards. It is equivalent to the Arcane Intellect spell. In general, cards that draw cards from the deck have potential, but it is difficult for me to imagine a deck that contains a large number of weapons, which means that in most traditional decks, it will be quite difficult to activate the effect.
Pyrate Technician is a card that wasn't completely useless, as it briefly became part of a broken combo that even led to the card being temporarily banned. This is a unique case where a very weak card created a broken interaction. The developers reacted quickly and Fireworks Druid didn't have time to become a prominent part of the metagame. If we're talking about traditional ways of playing the game, then the mana cost of the card should be justified by using at least 2 to 3 additional spells to compensate for the invested mana crystals. Under current circumstances, players have no way of extracting benefits from this card. The card can only be useful in conditions of unprecedented mana cheating.
Crowdsurfer is referenced by Leapfrogger from Battlegrounds. Generally, 1-mana cards find scenarios to use, but this is a very weak card. The big drawback is the possibility of transferring the buff to the opponent, in which case your minimum value can be 0, and the probability of this is quite high. Even if we imagine that the buff will wander from player to player, it will have a minimal impact on the match.
Concert Promo Drake is a terrible card for a couple of reasons. The first is the cost. 8 mana is way too expensive for this effect. In the late game, we want to play much more impactful cards. The high cost means that the card will sit in your hand for too long, and in many cases you will lose before you can use it. The tradable ability is nice. This creates flexibility and additional options, but at the same time it means that for 1 mana you are changing a card in your hand, so your value is 0. The condition for activating the effect creates additional disadvantages. It will be difficult for you to activate the card effect on turn 9. The only function of this card is to replenish the dragon pool, which makes it possible to obtain it using the Discover effect. This proves useful in specific scenarios.
Lastly, let's talk about the worst legendary card in the set. Rhythm Dancer Riza is a dual-class card for Rogue and Demon Hunter. This initially gave the card an advantage, as it had more opportunities to find a place in different strategies, but the card failed to do so. The buff allowed the card to fall into the Pirate Rogue strategy and become part of the meta, but only for a very short time. Demon Hunter really got terrible cards in this set.
Let's move on to conclusions. I often read in the comments that the game contains a huge number of completely useless cards. But this is not true. Out of 183 cards, only 16 cards have never seen the light of day. At the same time, one of them became a component of a broken synergy and found an unconventional use for some time.
Moreover, some of these cards are still used by enthusiasts, but this does not have any impact on the meta. There are very few initially terrible cards, but there are a large number of cards that were useful for a short period of time. All legendary cards occupied a niche in the metagame, at least for a short time, or were attractive enough for noticeable experiments.
It is also worth adding that Festival of Legends is the first set of the year. Traditionally, these expansions have a reduced power level and do not have a big impact over a long period of time. We also want to note that the current Hearthstone has a huge variety and a record number of cards find use cases.
Power creep has changed Hearthstone significantly. It's a different game, more dynamic, more explosive, more unpredictable, much less balanced. But the huge variation and diversity partially offset the shortcomings.
Despite the fact that players very often criticize the competitive environment and many are not satisfied with the current state of affairs, according to indirect data, the audience spends quite a lot of time in the game on a daily basis. Deck trackers are growing in popularity. More and more players are conquering legendary ranks in competitive formats. Based on this, we can even assume that the game's audience is growing. In addition, we have reason to believe that the game's return to China has turned out to be a huge success. The revenue dynamics on mobile platforms exceeds even our wildest expectations.
We like far from everything that happens with the game, but indirect data say that the developers are generally moving in the right direction in terms of design.
What do you think? Should we do a review of forgotten cards from other expansions?
If so, please let us know by clicking the like button. Are you satisfied with the current state of affairs in Hearthstone's constructed formats?
Share your thoughts in the comments and join the polls in the community tab.
Traditionally, we want to express our boundless gratitude to our sponsors.
Dear friends, your help is invaluable. We will be grateful for any support.
Okay, that's all for today. Thank you for spending this time with us. We really hope that we will have the opportunity to get in touch in the next video.
Take care of yourself.
And never give up.
Job's done.